It's been another busy week of cruise news and developments, including some really positive breakthroughs, although also a few setbacks. I'm Gary Bembridge, and this is another of my Tips for Travellers cruise updates, where I unpick 5 of the biggest breaking cruise news items and discuss what it means for all of us as cruisers. One disappointing piece of news is that the first cruise to depart in the Caribbean since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic came to an abrupt end after one passenger tested positive for COVID-19 on board. SeaDream 1 was a few days into its first Caribbean cruise out of Barbados with 53 passengers when one of them was not feeling well and tested positive for COVID on board. All guests and non-essential crew were immediately sent to their cabins to quarantine. The cruise was cut short and the ship sailed back to Barbados. They docked late at night, and in the morning the Barbados authorities, they took control with guests remaining quarantined in their cabins. And at the time of recording this, many were surprised by this development as guests had to produce a negative PCR COVID result taken within 72 hours of flying into Barbados as part of the country's entry requirements, and then the line tested guests before boarding as well. Now, this COVID issue shows the challenges that lines and guests face as cruising returns, because despite the layers of protocols, there could still be issues like this, and how lines deal with them is going to be key. It shows the real importance of the procedures to reduce the risk of bringing COVID on board, plus a process to quickly identify cases if they break out, as SeaDream did. This all then has to be backed up by a clear and quick plan on how to deal with them, which again SeaDream had. The most encouraging news in recent days is, of course, about vaccines and how they may help to return cruising closer to those pre-pandemic ways. Like most people, I was really excited by the news that the Pfizer BioNTech COVID vaccine had a 90% success rate in their clinical trials. However, it's not all good news for cruising just yet. The day the news broke, travel shares, including cruise lines, shot up. Carnival shares jumped 39%, Royal Caribbean 27%, Norwegian 28%, but then stalled. These new prices are still below the level they were in June, when there last was a bit of a rally. Even with these gains, the share prices are well below half of where they were before the pandemic. So why was there a good initial bounce, but not a steady turnaround in the share price? Now, investors and the scientific community understand that as good as this news is, there is still a way to go before vaccines will impact and allow cruising to open and return to the way it was, to attract cruisers back in really big numbers. Now, on the vaccine, they still have to finish safety testing. They have to get regulatory approval. They have to manufacture enough of them. They have to get them distributed. Now, there's a big logistics on how to do that when the vaccine has to be kept at minus 70, minus 80 degrees Celsius. People require 2 jabs, 3 weeks apart, and so on. It's not also known completely yet if the vaccine stops you spreading the virus or just from developing symptoms, if it works in high-risk elderly people the same way, nor how long immunity lasts. So basically what scientists say is this is going to take months, if not years, to answer all of these fully. So of course the news that vaccines look possible and are coming is huge news for cruising, and a good reason to be optimistic that they could and will play a major role in returning cruising closer to how it was pre-pandemic. However, timing may be slower than all of us hope. Certainly, it's unlikely to change much in practice heading into 2021. And if you are hoping cruises in the first half of 2021 may be very different to what's being outlined now, that does look unlikely. So why is that the case? Now, the health authorities like the CDC in the US and the equivalent across the various parts of the world, and the cruise lines will have to develop and adapt their plans and protocols to incorporate vaccines alongside or in addition to current protocols. So there's still a lot that has to happen before they can even consider doing that. So certainly until vaccines are rolled out and kind of widely adopted, the existing protocols, such as the framework for additional sailing in the US, are going to remain. So this includes things like testing before boarding and again before disembarking, reduced capacity, masks and face coverings, physical distancing, limiting ports to cruise line and excursions, those kind of things. And this is what the lines will be focusing on for the months ahead, as this will get them all sailing again. And that is their absolute key focus right now. But certainly as we make our way through 2021, it does look like vaccines could now lead to easing and lifting of many of the changes that cruisers are not all looking forward to. So if you are hoping to have a closer to pre-pandemic cruise experience thanks to vaccines, what I recommend is focus your cruise plans on the second half of 2021, certainly for now anyway. But if, like me, you want to cruise heading into 2021, work on the basis that the more restrictive protocols are what will be in place. Building on from that advice, today, as I record this, Carnival have removed all 2021 sailings of over 7 nights out of US ports from its website. Why have they done that? Well, the CDC framework for conditional sailing requires all cruises to be 7 nights or less until they revoke their order, which is only due to expire in November 2021. Now, Carnival have not cancelled the cruises yet, but they have stopped selling them. Now, they say that once they conclude their discussions with the CDC on all of the terms in the plans to return to service, they will then update travel agents and guests on what will happen finally to those cruises longer than 7 nights. Other lines are likely to follow the step, as it is a requirement for the return to cruise in the US of A. Now, this again is more evidence that you should plan, certainly at least for the first half of 2021, to expect the more restricted cruise experience. And I recommend focus on 7-night or shorter cruises if you want to focus early in 2021. Now, we don't know if passengers will be allowed to book back-to-back cruises to have longer vacations. It was not discussed in the framework document from the CDC. So this is something we will need to wait for the more detailed CDC protocols and rules to cover to see how that's going to work. Meanwhile, while this is all going on, there could be promising news for UK cruisers. The government there has reportedly signalled they're actively looking at lifting their total ban on ocean cruising. The UK-based cruise lines, that's things like P&O Cruises, Cunard, Saga, Fred Olsen, along with some who home-based ships in the UK in the summer, so like Princess Cruises, for example, they partnered with the UK and Ireland Cruise Line Association, and they produced a discussion document a couple of months back, which have protocols for resuming cruising for discussion with the UK government. Now, this included testing, capacity reduction, masks, cruise line only excursions, and all the other measures like those we've seen proposed in the US, in Italy, Germany, Singapore, and so on. So nothing out of the ordinary there. Now, after a really long silence, a UK government spokesman has been quoted in the UK's Daily Mail newspaper saying, and I'm going to quote, "We are working on a framework to allow the industry to reopen safely early in the new year that will allow cruises to restart and enable bookings to take place to start bringing money into the cruise industry again." Now, this could be as soon as, the spokesman said, around the UK coast, resuming as soon as January 2021. It's implied this would be for UK guests only, but this was not explicit in the interview. They also said, though, once they allow lines to go beyond the UK, they will require them to take full responsibility for repatriating passengers to the UK in the case of outbreaks further afield. Now, the UK government is especially sensitive on this topic because they had to arrange and cover the costs of repatriating around 19,000 cruise passengers at the start of the pandemic. So that is a big issue for them. So this major cruise country may see cruising being allowed to resume in a limited way pretty soon. I will keep you posted as we await more formal confirmation from the government, which hasn't come as yet. Now, in the last few days, Norwegian Cruise Group, so that's Norwegian Cruise Line, Oceania, and Regent Seven Seas, they've been updating the financial community on their results and what's going on. There are a few really interesting snippets of news for us as cruisers. First of all, they were not that upbeat about how fast cruising will return in the US. They said that while the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's framework for conditional sailing order, as it's called, is a step forward, there remain, and they quote, significant uncertainties when it comes to certain requirements. So just what's actually going to happen. And they're really waiting for more detailed technical instructions from the CDC around all the phases to be able to plan it properly. Now, the CDC has only issued the ones related to crew at the time of recording, and there's no timeline confirmed on when the rest will come to enable them to plan for resumption. Secondly, they confirmed that overall demand for cruising, though, is pretty good looking ahead, certainly by cruisers who've cruised in the past. So while bookings for the first half of 2021 are lower than pre-pandemic levels, they have better demand for the second half of 2021, which is basically reflecting, I guess, the hope the cruisers have that by the second half of 2021, things will be back to more normal. They also quoted they had great success with even further out cruises for 2022-2023 itineraries for Oceania and Region 7 Seas, again showing cruisers are optimistic about cruising returning to some sort of level of normality in the years ahead. Also, it was interesting, the majority of bookings, around 70%, are by people using future cruise credits from cancelled cruises. So as to be expected, cruise vacations are appealing to certainly more seasoned cruisers for now. One of the stages for the resumption of cruising in the USA, as laid down by the CDC, is for the cruise lines to run a series of simulated cruises. These are to test all the new protocols and run tests of proposed quarantine and evacuation procedures and all that kind of stuff. Now, many cruisers have said they would be really keen and have asked how can they volunteer. So what is the latest news on these test cruises and volunteering? Now, at this stage, the lines are all saying it is too early. They still have to agree when and in what form these will be, and then, of course, who can take part. Now, it is possible that members of the public will be considered, as hinted recently by Royal Caribbean on a call they did with travel agents quite recently. Now, all we know is that the CDC require volunteers to be over 18, to be able to have a signed certificate from their doctor saying they don't have pre-existing medical conditions making them vulnerable for contracting COVID, that it can't be in return for payment or for any future employment, and that volunteers agree to follow all the protocols, mask testing, that kind of stuff, and that they need to be prepared to take part in the full testing and all the simulations. So it actually might not be that much fun, as the ships may not even sail anywhere, and all of this could be done in port, and it could require you doing numerous drills and various different run-throughs. But we do know that it will involve all the dining, all the entertainment, and any of the events that will be run once cruising resumes. So definitely something to think about carefully. As soon as I have more news, I will include how you can volunteer in these updates. So these are the biggest news stories breaking that I felt you need to know about and what I think they mean for us as cruise lovers. I have loads more Tips for Travellers episodes full of cruising advice and tips, so why not enjoy another one right now?